What was the decision then to leave YouTube? Because at the point where you left, you had like 500,000 subscribers.
Where the industry was at the time is that me coming from a background in making YouTube videos was a real problem for As It Is to be taken seriously. Ever since I was 10 or 12 years old, it was always be in a rock band. That was the dream. It was like this singularly focused life's path. And it was the only thing I sort of pursued or thought about or did all day. I need to give everything, all my best ideas, every idea to this band's debut record. And it turned out that in doing so, we would kind of end up writing the band's biggest song.
You feel like you'd failed them?
Yeah, completely. It was hard. I wanted better for all of us.
I guess the first question then, as always, is how did you get started in music?
So I got started in music, I suppose as a result of like falling in love with alternative music and music videos. So I was like a big music video kid. Like I discovered them anywhere between like 10 and 12 years old. And I started watching Kerrang and Scuzz and MTV2 and stuff, watching like the All the Small Things video, the Basket Case video and stuff. And just in an instant, I was like, I want to do that. That's the only thing I want to do. And I had started learning guitar pretty shortly thereafter. And I had a guitar teacher who would teach me both how to like learn a song by ear, but equally to just, I could just pick a song and ask, please teach me this. And he would. His name was Alex. He was great. And the first song I ever learned on guitar was The Best of Me by The Starting Line.
That was like my favorite song growing up.
That whole record, that band, obsessed, always have been, always will be.
Kerry V was one of the only people, I won't give any more of my own stories because Joe gets angry, but
No,
he's
please,
like the only person that I've openly fangirled, and Lee just told him and was like, I'm fangirling, you're going to have to put up with it.
Yeah. No, his voice is so unique. I'm obsessed with that band. You can hear so much of the like As It Is lead parts in The Best of Me, both in the like octaves, but the leads, the twiddly sort of, open string stuff, the E and B open strings. So, and then I started learning drums shortly thereafter, sort of self-taught bass, and, played around with like singing and screaming, although it was the thing that I felt like I was the least good at, which is a funny thing about being a singer in a band. But yeah, ever since I was 10 or 12 years old, it was always be in a rock band. That was the dream. It was like this singularly focused life's path. And it was the only thing I sort of pursued or thought about or did all day. And sort of kind of quickly threw a band together with some friends from school. Did a few of those, in some I would play guitar and sing, some I play drums and sing or not sing. And yeah, I remember the best thing about it being that I was quite like a shy, introverted kid. I'm still a very shy and introverted person. And performance gave me this outlet to sort of be somebody else, somebody that I kind of wished that I could be, somebody like loud and confident and commanding. And for, I don't know, anywhere between 15 to 20 or 30 or 45 minutes, I got to be somebody else, this sort of idealized romantic version of myself. And it just became the most important thing in my life, like this thrill, this thing I chased and pursued. And yeah, it's led me here, which I'm pleased about.
Did it feel then like you were playing a character?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it was like a Jekyll and Hyde thing. It was just two versions of the same person, I guess. There was me, authentic, but sort of shy, insecure, a little anxious, and I got to when I got to perform, those things weren't at like the forefront of who I was. They were still there. But just something took over. It was just a different version of myself. And I just fell in love with it. completely.
How did that lead then to you originally getting started on YouTube?
So YouTube's one of these funny sort of accidents. It might seem like a really smart choice. I don't know if it was. I was a MySpace kid. I in my like early bands and musical careers and stuff would just record songs at home, put them on MySpace, reach out to like venues and promoters and try to get shows and stuff. But MySpace was on the decline and YouTube was on the incline. And I was into YouTubers anyway. But I always sort of saw myself as one of these musicians on YouTube. And it was just the smartest platform at the time to be releasing music, pursuing a career in the music industry. But it very quickly became about covers and reaching a new audience through covers. And I did covers on my YouTube channel once a week, every Sunday for 5 or 6 years. And I just sort of saw that as one, if I don't make a really strict rule out of this, I won't continue at a pace that is going to get me anywhere. And equally too, as I sort of saw them as the equivalent of like shows or like performing at an open mic night. It's just another opportunity to be on a stage and reaching people. And that's just sort of all it was. I didn't really like think about it all that deeply. It was just fun. It was just a fun thing to do.
What was the sort of early success with that? Because it blew up like pretty huge.
It's yeah, it's funny that you say that because at a certain point it did, and it may have looked like an overnight success, especially in, I forget when Wrecking Ball came out, but that was my first video or cover to exceed 1 million views, which happened really, really quickly. But you know, there were years before that where I would just cover songs by the Early November and the Swellers and, you know, like smaller artists that I was really into. And those covers were more for me than for, I don't know, trying to reach a huge audience or blow up on the internet or whatever. But yeah, there were a few, you know, I covered Paramore and they shared that on their Facebook page. I covered Sleeping with Sirens, and Kellen sort of got in touch, and he's still like a really close friend. But yeah, the Wrecking Ball cover, I forget what year that came out, 2012, 2013, 2014 maybe. But yeah, Miley Cyrus dropped that song. And it was all about being the first one to get to a big song. The earlier you got to it, the more you could sort of capitalize off the trending algorithms. And it happened to come out in sort of early September or whatever. And I remember, you know, I filmed that on September 10th or 11th because my birthday is September 12th. And I was editing on Final Cut for 8 or 9 hours so that I could upload it as soon as possible. And it just happened to be my birthday. So, yeah, I remember that really clearly, like, either canceling or not caring about any sort of birthday plans. It was like, it's just about this video today, which ended up being a good decision, but you never know. There were all sorts of songs that I thought were going to be huge successes and weren't. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll just try again next week, I guess.
Did it feel like a huge success when you got there?
It did. I mean, like every cover and every song felt like a huge success. It was never easy. Like it was like all-nighters of like recording and editing audio and then editing video and all this sort of stuff and trying to get like an online audience engaged to use social media cleverly. Tumblr was huge at the time for promoting like covers and YouTube content and stuff. It was a lot of work, but it was fun.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt the podcast, but if you're enjoying it, please give us a rate and a review on Spotify or Apple. If you're watching us on YouTube, please give us a subscribe. It really, really helps the channel knowing that we've got the subscribers and people are listening and rating and reviewing it. It'll help us keep booking more guests and doing more podcasts. So do us that one little favor and we'll be able to keep booking more people and keep doing more episodes. Back to it. How quickly then did you go from being like, I'm going to cover the early November because I love it, to I'm going to cover this chart song because it's going to be massive?
I did them both at the same time. There was no, I mean, it was like, it would have been inauthentic to pivot, I guess. It was just like, I'm just, yeah, gonna do what feels fun. And some of them are really gonna take off and some of them aren't, but they're songs that I love. They're important to me and they might be important to somebody else too. It's the thing that I've really connected with and found importance in, is that, you know, As It Is isn't a huge band, but the majority of my favorite bands also aren't huge bands. And you can have a real impact on people without being a stadium or an arena level band. We're a sort of mid-level band if we want to get granular about it, but so many of my favorite bands have been even smaller than where we're at now. And that doesn't mean that they haven't like shaped my life or gotten lyrics or artwork tattooed on me and stuff. Like that's real. That's the power of art. It's not about the superficial success.
Who are the bands that you feel like shaped you in your sort of earlier days?
The Drive-Thru Records roster was huge. So bigger names like Newfound Glory, but Hidden in Plain View, The Early November, Finch Starting Line. That Finch record, that first Finch record, is like no skips. It is so incredible. If anybody watching hasn't listened to What It Is to Burn by Finch, it is an unbelievably good record.
It is literally,
and it still sounds incredible, like 20 or more years later. But who else on Drive-Thru? There was Alistair, Hello Goodbye, basically Homegrown. That like entire Drive-Thru Records roster was huge for me and for As It Is. They were some of our biggest influences for sure.
I mean, every single band on that roster
I know,
is
right?
one that, like, I guess we're probably the same age, so there's like the age demographic connects with it.
Definitely.
Finch are playing Slam Dunk this year, and it's going to be the first Slam Dunk. I really want to take. I'm going to have like a newborn, like 2 weeks
Congratulations.
after. Thank you, but like, I really want to go to Slam Dunk still. So I'm like, can I take a fucking 2-week-old? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it's to see Finch.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a pretty cool fucking show to be like your first show.
Absolutely it is.
2 weeks.
Oh, congrats. That's really
great.
cool.
Was YouTube very different back then to how it is now? Because you've
my
like
gosh.
recently uploaded something.
Yeah. No, YouTube was completely different. I think the thing that attracted me to YouTube and like YouTubers back in the day was that it was almost a counterculture, sort of like the alternative music scene. It was a place where weirdos like me didn't fit in with the normies that we all like went to school with or had to go to work with. You know, you did it because it was fun and you sort of found your community there. But YouTube and social media now is just mainstream culture, and it's been totally like reshaped by that. And there are still sort of small corners of it where weird little communities like ours find each other. But back then, sort of pre-2010, it was just a place for fucking weirdos. And I loved it for that reason. It felt really special. What was really funny about when I started going to YouTube gatherings, which is a thing that I and we, the YouTube community, did, was we like met up in parks in London and stuff, and we would sort of meet fellow YouTubers and people that watched our videos and stuff. And I would bring an acoustic guitar. Well, actually, before I used to do that, I would go without a guitar, and people would bring guitars and ukuleles, and they would cover songs. And from what I remember, they were sort of like Adele covers and Bruno Mars covers, and people would watch and sing along, but they'd be wearing fucking My Chem shirts and Fall Out Boy shirts. And I'm like, there's like a fundamental disconnect here, right? Is these people grew up listening to the same music I did. I bet if I bring a guitar and I cover, I don't know, I'm Not Okay or something, there might be an audience for that here. And it turned out that there was. So I started doing that, and sort of like made a name for myself in that community in person at those gatherings and stuff. And that sort of became Summer in the City. I know you just had Mark Walker on the show, who I love with my whole heart. And Yeah, I started going to Summer in the City in either 2012 or 2013, maybe even earlier. I don't remember. But the band got to perform at Summer in the City 2014. Um, Still one of the biggest shows we ever played, and hadn't even released a record yet. But YouTube then was different and really special. I feel really lucky and really privileged that I got to experience that. Yeah.
You were there at the start.
Yeah.
What was the decision then to leave YouTube? Because at the point where you left, you had like 500,000 subscribers.
Right. Ben and I have talked a lot about this recently.
It's a wild number, man.
Yeah, it's really difficult for people in the modern age to understand why you would step away from an audience and a platform like that. But where the industry was at the time, maybe not the sort of mainstream pop industry, but certainly the alternative music industry, is that me coming from a background in making YouTube videos was a real problem for As It Is to be taken seriously by anyone. And that is speaking for both the community and the industry, is journalists and promoters and all sorts of other people in the industry did not take As It Is very seriously because I came from a background in making YouTube videos. So that is one of the reasons that I stepped away, because I had pursued YouTube. First it was MySpace, then it was YouTube, to try to attain this career in the music industry, to be that rock star. Like I said, when I was 10 or 12, that's what I wanted to do. And here I am in my early 20s. That opportunity is here, and I need to give that 110%. And I wanted nothing to distract me. What also helped me to decide is that I was still trying to make covers, do sort of punk goes pop style covers of rock covers of pop songs. And I was working on one. There was a song called Rude by a band called Magic that was really big at the time, and it went, "Why you gotta be so rude?" And I was working on a cover of that for my YouTube channel at exactly the same time that the band was writing Never Happy Ever After. So it was 2014. And musically, I really liked it. I thought there was a lot of potential in the bones of the song. And that song became Dial Tones. We completely repurposed the musical bedrock of a cover I was going to do, for a song that nobody really remembers or talks about anymore, and released the biggest song that the band has ever made. And it's really funny because following the chorus of that song, it goes, "Marry that girl, marry her anyway." And you can still hear it in coming out of the chorus of Dial Tones, where it goes, "Da, da, da, da." So that's "Marry that girl." And that was there for the purpose of the cover. It was like locking in with the melody and the top line. That was another reason that I decided I don't know if I should be doing these two things at the same time. As It Is the thing I feel more passionately about. I need to give everything, all my best ideas, every idea, to this band's debut record. And it turned out that in doing so, we would kind of end up writing the band's biggest song.
Playing devil's advocate to that,
Please.
you wouldn't have wrote an incredible song in theory then if you weren't trying to cover something. So was there not the thought that like maybe I should keep doing these covers because they lead to really awesome material for us?
And it's cool and interesting that you say that, because I kept doing that in moments that,
Okay.
I would sort of take the top line or the just basic fundamental idea of a pop song, and write a cover that I knew I wasn't going to release. Hey Rachel was one of those. I don't even remember what song that I was like covering at the time, but it produced results for me, possibly just because it was something that I knew really, really well and had been doing for years, or possibly just because that it got myself out of my own way a little bit. It just gave me a sort of like head start to sort of build a song around an already existing idea and then just change it later down the line.
That's a really cool way to approach doing it. I mean, talking about the stigma, because that's a a really good reason for
Mhm.
someone to, and sensible reason for someone to be like, I had to move away from it. Do you think, because we talked about this a bit with Mark, because there's still a stigma now for influencers that try to break in music. Do you think that if you'd stayed with it, Dial Tones was such a good song in its own right that people would have had to ignore that you're a YouTuber? Because no one could listen to that song, regardless of whether you're a YouTuber or not, and be like, it's not a sick fucking song.
Sure.
Especially like for a pop punk band in the slam dunk scene at that time. Like, did that not just give credibility?
Maybe, perhaps. I guess I don't know. I mean, the other thing to speak to too is just that, in 2014, it was easier to still be making YouTube videos. The band was writing our debut record, but we only played 40 shows. But in the following year, in 2015, we played 175 shows. And we were busy working on our next record as well. It is pretty hard to do anything extracurricular when you're moving at that pace and you're in strange places that you've never been to. It was our first time seeing a bunch of these cities like Tokyo and Sydney and Toronto. And to try to make space or time for YouTube videos just wasn't possible, at least not for me. Maybe somebody who's just better at multitasking, but that's not who I am.
That's a lot that's going on. So how did it can't even say that. How did Out As It Is form?
The band formed through a site called joinmyband.co.uk.
I remember that.
Yeah. I didn't know many people with whom to sort of like start a band. The only person that I knew prior was Ben. And I posted on joinmyband.co.uk saying, I'm interested in getting a band together. I don't even think I said what instrument I'd be interested in playing, because I remember when we formed the band, I was of the belief that I should play bass and sing harmonies. I didn't see myself as a lead singer. But when I asked Ben to join the band, he thought he'd be playing drums. So everybody was playing an instrument that we thought somebody else should be doing. But I remember sort of the influences that I sort of cited at the time were sort of like that easy core blend of pop punks, so sort of like 4 Year Strong, A Day to Remember, Set Your Goals type of stuff. And you can hear that in the earliest As It Is songs. And we found our drummer Foley through joinmyband.co.uk. And then we eventually found Ali, who was in an amazing local band called Red Kite, who were no longer active, and our bassist had stepped away. And then we had the band, but we didn't know each other. It was really weird. We didn't grow up together. We had to sort of like become friends and make memories through As It Is instead of the other way around, which I think is maybe not what most bands do. And I don't know if anybody expected this to be the band that would make it. I think we thought we'd just sort of play some local shows, have a bit of fun, see how long it sticks around, and then maybe we sort of start something else down the line. It just so happens that it was the project that connected and took off.
How quickly did it build traction?
Well, it's really interesting that you ask that, because we didn't really know that there was traction for a while, because for 2 years we just sort of played local shows, mostly in Brighton, some in London and the sort of south and stuff. But we didn't play north of London for 2 years. We started the band in 2012, and our first UK tour, our first tour of any kind, was in 2014. And we toured to promote the release of an EP that we made called This Mind of Mine. And the big single on that EP was Can't Save Myself. So the first date of our first tour was in Scotland. It was in Glasgow, and we drove all the way up, furthest from home we'd ever been playing shows. And there were just under 100 people there, which was crazy. And I think too, we'd been playing 18 plus shows in Brighton and stuff, like club shows, nightclub shows. And there was this audience of people that weren't old enough to be coming to those shows that liked the band and couldn't come. And then yeah, we turned up in Glasgow and people knew the words to the band, and that was new. That was totally new. And it turns out that there had been traction that we didn't even know about for a while. Um, and yeah, people were singing the words back and buying merch, which pretty rarely happened in those days. And every date on that tour was amazing. Um, and then shortly after coming back, we got approached by our manager, Leander, who you've had on the show. He's an amazing episode. Um, and after management came a record label and promoters and booking agents and PR and all this sort of stuff. And it just happened really, really fast. It all just happened sort of as a result of Can't Save Myself and that tour. Um, and it felt like it just happened all at once, but there were 2 years of us playing shows to basically nobody. And when we played to people, they often didn't fucking care because we weren't a cool band. Like the DIY sort of punk scene in Brighton was cool, and we were not cool. So we had no idea that there was this sort of like underground hype about the band.
How were those fans finding you?
So it would have been because I didn't really I was making YouTube videos, but I didn't really talk about the band very much. But I did start talking about the band so that we could like crowd fund recording this Mind of Mine. And yeah, we had like a really successful Kickstarter, and we got to record the record in a real studio, which we'd never done before. And I guess through that, people started to sort of discover the band, but I wasn't really like promoting. Like they were two really, really different things, different just outlets in my life for a long time. But I guess when we started sort of promoting the crowd-funded EP and put it out, and shared Can't Save Myself, I guess that's when people sort of found us for the first time.
How different was it then once you'd got Leander and you signed your record deal? What was the sort of trajectory then?
It was very, very suddenly 100 miles an hour. It all started happening really, really, really quickly. I think we signed with Fearless Records months after Leander took us on.
Were you the first UK band to sign with them?
We were the first UK band to sign to Fearless Records, which is crazy because I grew up listening to their artists at like At the Drive-In and Sugar Cult and all these bands that I'd like worshipped. And he was managing Neck Deep, and they were the first band to sign to Hopeless Records, which is crazy because it's easy to sort of overlook and forget that like amazing British pop punk and emo and post-hardcore bands weren't getting the opportunities that our bands had. And I think that that's a result of sort of social media, like YouTube and Tumblr and Instagram and stuff like that. It was a really wild time. Because that's it, is like it had never happened before. So why would you expect that it's going to happen to you? And we didn't. That didn't seem possible. So our ambitions weren't quite so lofty.
Did that feel like being the first people to sign to them? Did that feel more special than if it had been like another label where you were just one of the bands?
I think so. Yeah, it was an American label, and it was it seemed so far out of reach for us, and it's just this like milestone, this achievement that no matter what happened or happens to the band, nobody can like take that away.
Yeah, well, no other band is ever going to get that.
It was it was incredible. Yeah, but like we worshipped bands on those labels like that, so it was huge.
How did that compare, sort of like emotionally, to getting your first million views?
Oh, it was completely different. I mean, like the first million views was incredible, and it was worth celebrating. But like I said, I mean, like when I was a really, really young child, this was the goal. This was the dream, signing that record contract and touring with all of the bands that I grew up listening to and looking up to. That was the goal. So that was the really special, sentimental moment more than anything else.
Which were the sort of special tours that you got onto after signing that?
Our first US tour was in 2015, opening for Set It Off, who I'd seen quite a few times when they came over to the UK. And our second US tour was the Vans Warped Tour, which was unbelievably surreal, incredibly difficult, and maybe the most fun I've ever had was doing the Warped Tour. And then later that year, our third American tour was opening for Mayday Parade and Real Friends and This Wildlife on the AP tour. And that was the first time we got to do like House of Blues sized venues, and the Starland Ballroom, which there was a live album of Coheed and Cambria playing the Starland Ballroom in New Jersey. So playing that was hugely sentimental for me. I listened to that record a bunch as a kid. We got to open for Sum 41 and Census Fail in North America. We got to open for Sleeping with Sirens in the UK, who I'd covered on YouTube and loved. There were so many, I'm sure I'm leaving some out, but yeah, we really got to tour with our heroes and get to call them friends. Like, I mean, gosh, between like Mayday Parade and Silverstein and Sum 41, like those were bands that I listened to as a kid, had their t-shirts, saw them at a bunch of shows, and now they're just mates. It's weird. But yeah, I still hugely look up to them, and they taught us a lot about how to treat bands. When you're the headliner, they oh my God, they were so kind to us, so like warm and welcoming. Loved touring with them.
Did it make a huge difference then if there was a band, you don't have to name names, but that wasn't warm and welcoming, like how you felt being on that tour?
Yeah. And what's interesting is like the bands that weren't warm and welcoming were rarely headliners. They were behaving like headliners, but they weren't always the headliners. Sometimes they were above us, sometimes they were below us, and they were just, I don't know. It wasn't the etiquette and the spirit of the scene. Like, it's the one of the documentaries about the Warped Tour was called No Room for Rock Stars, and that was always the ethos for me and us in the band, and kind of all of us. Like, just to be a narcissistic fucking dickhead idiot was just like never a cool thing to do. It didn't make friends, it didn't impress anybody, and it was always really like surprising and disappointing to see when bands would sort of behave like that and be difficult and bring their egos into it. We were just there to sort of play shows, have fun, hang out. Like, didn't matter if you were the artist or the crew or in the industry. Like, we're all just here because we fucking love this, not because it's cool. It kind of isn't a lot of the time. Like, we grew up in a world where this scene, this community wasn't cool, but it was home. So to not treat it like your home, to not invite people into your home, just always felt strange to me.
Did you feel cool as fuck when you were on Warped Tour? I don't know how you couldn't.
It was our first time on a tour bus. That felt really cool. Yeah. And to just sort of getting to watch so many bands that I grew up listening to, completely worshipped. Some of them were the Wonder Years, Pierce the Veil, Transit. Oh my God, I was such a big Transit fan, and I still am. They're not around anymore, but Ella from Transit sings on Never Happy Ever After X, which we re-recorded our first album. The man, just watching them every single day that I could was incredible. And yeah, you just Warped Tour was like this unicorn. Like, you never thought you'd get to see the other side of it. But getting to live it was pretty amazing.
How influential was that for the band?
Yeah, it was huge. I mean, it certainly grew the band. We were playing bigger shows by the end of it than we were at the start of it. But more so, you just become a better band on the other side of it, because you play just show after show after show, and you play a different time of day every day, and you don't find out what time you're playing until that morning. And yeah, okay, well, you haven't had time to warm your voice up. Tough fucking luck. You're on at 10:45. And then you have to sell records and merch and sell them yourselves to the Lion, just so that you can pay for that big fucking bus. And yeah, it was huge because it didn't just teach us how to be a better live band. It taught us how to be a band, how to grind, and that you should never feel too cool or too entitled to grind. Like, this is, you know, your job.
Which are the parts then that makes it hard?
I mean, the weather made it hard. Playing in like over 110-degree heat in Vegas, or finishing our set 3 songs in Florida because like 65-mile-per-hour winds were coming in and a tornado was getting really close to Warped Tour. It's like, that made it hard because you just never knew what was gonna happen. But equally too, just sort of like taking care of yourself. Like, the Warped Tour is not going to wait for you. It's your responsibility to make sure you are getting enough sleep and you are drinking enough water and you are eating well so that you can play a show tomorrow. It's wild. There's nothing like it, and there probably never will be ever again. So I feel incredibly fortunate that we got to do it twice, but even just once would have been enough.
Was that a point where you just felt like you'd made it?
Yeah, I mean,
like going back to like the idea of like when you're 12, that's the thing that you want to do. Because I remember being 12 and wanting to be in a famous band, and to me, doing Warped Tour was the pinnacle.
It's funny because it's, the thing that I've learned just sort of about like my life and my mental health is that like happiness isn't like this destination. You don't reach it and find just sort of finality and stability there. So there were like 100% moments where it was like, we've made it. And then life would remind you that you haven't. And, we were the first UK band assigned to Fearless Records. We got to do the Warped Tour twice, and we got to tour with Sum 41 in North America. When I started getting into music production, one of my heroes was John Feldman. His records just sounded unbelievable. And I was out doing like co-writes in LA, and he didn't have time to co-write with us, but he still had us in for breakfast, and he like cooked breakfast for us in his kitchen. And that was huge for me. That was unbelievably surreal. He was really kind, and I just worshipped him and have done for most of my life. So there have been a bunch of moments where it's like, this is everything I'd dreamt it would be. But then it doesn't fix like everything. Maybe it's how society is sort of built, or it's just how we're wired, that we're just always chasing the next thing. I don't know if I was always present enough, because gosh, we were just moving at this unbelievably relentless pace at the time. And it was tricky. Like, we were trying to write songs and perform the best shows we could, but we were also trying to like run a business, and that's not why you start a band, but it becomes a priority pretty quickly. Otherwise you can't do it anymore. So feeling like you've made it, making us as little as it was, they didn't really sort of like coexist all that well. I guess life would remind you that you haven't made it just yet.
Was it difficult then, because it's such a relentless thing? Like, being on tour in general is actually quite difficult. There's a lot of people I know that really think they're going to love it, and then actually it's just exhausting. Warped Tour, from everyone I've spoke to, it's like the most hardcore, exhausting version of that, as much as they love it. So how difficult then was it for you guys at the time then to be present and to appreciate it, and not just be like, man, this is fucking hard. Like,
Yeah,
just tired. Like, I want to go home.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard, and I had to sort of learn my own slow and gradual way that, struggling with life and like my mental health on the road didn't mean that I was ungrateful for the success that we were starting to see as a band. It just meant that I was still a person that, like, I don't know, things about life were still gonna be hard and happen. So to spend the majority of the year on tour was tough, and we were like a smaller, a mid-level band, so we weren't always able to afford crew for every show. When we opened for Mayday Parade in late 2015, we had no crew. It was just us in the band driving a van and trailer all across America and selling the shirts ourselves and tour managing ourselves and setting up all of the gear and making sure it worked, and nobody to do front of house. So we just had to sort of, it was hard. It was really hard. Um, but we also kind of didn't know all that differently, right? Like, it was all we'd sort of known at that point. And we didn't want it to stop. Maybe we wanted it to be easier, but at the same time, we were getting to live our dreams. So we just sort of thought it was, the price of sort of getting to experience that. And I wouldn't change that for anything. But yeah, and just tour isn't a place to work on your mental health, really. It's just not the right environment to feel grounded and to like work through stuff that's challenging. So I didn't prioritize that until sort of the band started to sort of slow down gradually. And it meant that I could actually sort of do the band again, like look forward to this, and be able to do it at a sustainable pace. Yeah.
Why was it then that the band decided to break up?
It's funny because
everything just sounds so positive.
Sure, right? Yeah. It wasn't, we were having fun, but we were really tired. And it was all that we had ever done since we started the band. So when Ben stepped away in 2019, and one by one members of the band started to exit the project, I think we were all ready to be done and to, if not move on, take a break, and just work through some stuff that hadn't been able to be prioritized. But I don't know if we were all ready to accept that as at the same time. I was certainly the last to accept that. And early last year in 2024, I posted on social media saying I'm stepping away from the music industry. This hasn't been at the forefront of my life for years now. I've found stability and prioritized things that are making me feel really fulfilled outside of music, which was something I never thought I would find, by the way. Is like, I had one pursuit, one dream, and it was always music. And I had to sort of, it was really painful and weird and scary, the prospect of, am I ever going to be happy without music in my life? I don't know, but I had to sort of face that head on. Maybe that was why I was one of the last ones to step away, is I thought that there was no other career option for me, until I felt like I have to do this now. So yeah, that's just like one of the many, many reasons why the band slowed down, and sort of everybody started to work on other projects, solo projects, musical projects, apart from me. I was like, felt really burned by music. A career in it didn't interest me at all.
Which parts of it made you feel burned?
Debts. Trying to run a business, which was really, really hard. People that didn't make me, I don't know, weren't bringing enough to me and my life. And yeah, just needing to prioritize myself and only myself. And I think the biggest shame is we talked about getting a farewell tour together and getting to say goodbye and to get that closure, both for us in the band, but like the fans of the band. Like, there were people who traveled all over the world to watch the band. They would come to every date of every tour. And they deserved to celebrate and say goodbye too. And that as another thing that didn't happen. So
Did you feel like you'd failed them?
Yeah, completely.
Did the other members of the band feel like that?
I think so. Yeah, I don't know if we've talked about it, but I imagine that they would. It was hard. I wanted better for all of us. It felt like that was what we deserved, and it didn't happen. So I had to just put myself first and find stability. Do regular therapy. I work for a charity now that's brought so much stability and purpose and fulfillment to my life. And when the prospect of bringing the band back, I was actually quite scared. It was like, I've done a lot of work to find happiness and stability now. I don't know if bringing this back is counterintuitive with where my life has been heading. But I remember in therapy talking about how much I missed music and performance. Like I was talking about earlier in this chat, is how to perform was this outlet and this opportunity to sort of be somebody else for a bit and to be confident and to feel really like good at what I was doing and to feel like liberated and not so fucking heavy all the time. I have a dog. I was throwing a ball for my dog this one time, and she just chases this ball, and it's like what she's born to do and built to do. And I was like, that's how I felt on stage. Like, I just felt free. I felt like I'm doing the thing I'm best at, and I'm not like insecure or worried or anxious for just a few minutes of the day. And I really, really wanted that back. And I so missed like collaborating on music with Ben and Leander and Ali and Foley. It's been amazing to like build things with people again, and to, it's not always easy to do this, but if there's joy in it, you don't mind.
How did the initial conversation come about the band reforming?
So Ben had been working on a project called Bleak Soul for a few years at this point. And when the band wasn't in a place where we could sort of start it again, Ben and I talked about starting some new project together, the two of us. And we tried writing something. And when it came to writing lyrics, I didn't break down, but I felt so incredibly like triggered by these like traumatic things that I hadn't yet processed and dealt with and healed from. So when Ben left, I sent him a text saying, really enjoyed that, and we should do this in the future, but I really need to like work through some real trauma first. I'm not ready.
Were these band related things or personal?
Both. And I started to do that. Therapy has completely changed my life, which I wouldn't have been able to do while the band was still touring at the pace that we were. And yeah, eventually I was ready. And that was sort of like early last year, in sort of March or April or May, Ben and I started to talk about sort of just bringing the band back from the dead. And I was like, yeah, I am ready, and I think it could be time. And then we went and saw, I remember Leander talked about this on the show. We went and saw Leander's new band Split Chain play a show in Brighton, and he had been out of the management game. He'd been working A&R at a record label. So we went to a restaurant with Leander before we watched Split Chain in Brighton. And we said to Leander, we're thinking about bringing the band back. And he said, do you know that I'm getting back into management? Which we didn't. And it was just this beautiful, cosmic, serendipitous, all at once in a single moment thing where everything felt right again, all of a sudden, and it hadn't felt right for 4 or 5 years. And yeah, then it was a matter of seeing where Ali and Foley were at, and they were up for it. And here we are. Yeah. slam dunk later this year, re-recorded our first album in full. It quickly became like a really big part of our lives again. But this is it, is, you know, we'd learned from the mistakes of burning ourselves out, moving at this unsustainable breakneck speed where, okay, so we have our lives, we have our personal lives, we have our stability, and we've learned about some of the pitfalls of the industry over the past 10 years. Let's introduce the band into our personal lives instead of trying to introduce ourselves again into the lives that we were living 10 years ago that completely burned us out or didn't work. And thus far, it's been working really well. I've really enjoyed it. But like I said, for a while, it almost felt like there was more to lose. Like I was walking backwards instead of, you know, stepping back into this huge opportunity. It was like, this could be fun, but am I just going to be unbelievably unhappy all over again? But thankfully, like, we're older, we're more emotionally intelligent. We know how to like advocate for like what we need and ask for help when we need it. It's just like a healthier environment and atmosphere and place to be in.
Can we talk about the new album or the re-release?
Just please.
So we've been sent it. It's absolutely fucking awesome.
Thank you very much.
The thing that stood out to me when Leander sent it over was that you produced it.
Yeah.
And like unbelievably well.
Thank you.
How did that just become a thing with you producing?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm like the best producer. I've been doing it for long enough that I know a little bit about like what I'm doing, but I don't think I'm good enough to like be doing it sort of the way that As It Is would go to a producer and they would do our record. But financially, it made the most sense that I produced it and mixed it. We got it mastered by Grant Berry, and he did amazing. Everything else was sort of done by me and by us.
Having listened to it, you are comfortably good enough to do it professionally.
Thanks very much. And the thing that is helping, the perspective that's been really helpful is, I don't know if you know this, but bands, artists, musicians, very insecure people, and we're always comparing ourselves to everybody else. Now the only thing that I'm interested in is comparing myself to the last thing I did. And this is better than the last thing that I produced. The last thing I produced for the band was The Great Depression Reimagined, and that was every song in a different style, a completely different style. And I learned a lot in doing that. And this is another record where I learned a lot in producing this. But it was, yeah, I'm really proud of it. It's not perfect, but I'm really proud of it. And I got better in doing it. And when I next, produced something, it'll hopefully be better than this. But for now, I'm proud, and that'll be enough.
Where did the decision come from to actually do it? Because it's an anniversary one, right?
Yeah. The idea came about when I was on a run. So it was sort of like late summer. And then I just had this idea, and we didn't know that it was going to be the entire album. Maybe the singles, you know, certainly Dial Tones, but maybe we'd also do Cheap Shots and Setbacks, and we'd do Speak Soft. Can't Save Myself, perhaps. But we would re-record them, either faithfully or drastically different, we don't know, but with a guest on each of these singles. And when we were touring the Great Depression with bands like Enter Shikari and stuff, and we were leaning more into this darker, minor, post-hardcore sound, we started playing this drop C version of Dial Tones, and that's exactly what we recorded. So that existed already. And we were like, well, who would be the perfect feature on this? And we very quickly realized that was Lucas from Holding Absence. We took them out on one of their first big UK tour. They hadn't even released a record yet, but we were just huge fans of them. I'm just subscribed to Sharp Tone on YouTube. I saw their music video and I was like, oh, this is really cool. We should bring this band out. And he is so unbelievably talented and incredibly nice. He is one of the best people I have ever met in my life. I love hanging out with him. And he made so much sense for Dial Tones X. So we reached out and we were ecstatic when he said yes. And then we started to piece the other ones together, with Cheap Shots and Setbacks. We have Mikey from Mallory Knox, and we have the Alexes from Rome. Both bands that we have history with and loved touring with and loved as people. And then, we'd sort of paired up all these features with all the singles, and we were like, well, okay, why don't we just do the whole record? Why not? We're just getting carried away. It could be fun. And then we had a feature on more than half the songs. We're like, well, now it's weird if there's only 3 that don't have features. And we just kept reaching out to people who were even less likely to say yes, like Hidden in Plain View, who I worshipped, but we'd never really met, or Brown Sound, who was busy like playing shows, Sum 41's final shows when he recorded his solo for My Oceans Were Lakes. They seemed really unlikely, but people made time. And it's such like a huge achievement to just be doing this sort of in our spare times and around the structure of our personal lives, to re-record our first record in full, and mix it ourselves and all this sort of stuff. It was just so much fun. It was a lot of work and it was a lot of time, but it was fun.
Is it released through Fearless?
No, this is released through Slam Dunk Records.
I did know that. Yeah.
So with the B-sides and rarities, we put out a B-sides and rarities album called A Decade Uneventful, and we put that out through Slam Dunk Records, and we were really, really enjoying working with them. Never Happy X is another project and release with them, and we've really, really liked it. It's been really cool.
Looking back at what you've learned, then, if you could go back 10 years, would you do things differently?
Yeah. I wouldn't say that I regret anything, but I would do things differently, and I would sort of advocate for myself more. I would ask for help more and just be vulnerable more. I've become really comfortable with being really vulnerable, just about how I'm weird. I've got these weird, complicated emotions. My mental health has been tricky at a bunch of different times. And I've needed things that I didn't ask for and didn't let people in on. But every time I've been vulnerable or I've asked for help, people have been kind. And I would do that differently. I would listen to myself more and ask for what I need more. But I don't regret anything. It's been such a fun ride. It's been exactly the dream that I hoped I would get to live. We're not the biggest band in the world, but like I said, my favorite bands have never been big bands. So we have a community of people who really love and connect with this band. And I stepped away from music, and I saw how the rest of the world, the normal world, sort of engages with music, and they have stressful lives and responsibilities, and they need music passively or to go to a gig or a festival, and how important that is for them. I didn't always feel like music was important or selfless. It felt like an ego thing. It felt really selfish, this is just about me. But it's it gives something to people, and I believe that art is so important. It isn't always prioritized or incentivized by our society or by governments. There's not a lot of money or support in it, but art fucking matters, and I love it more than anything, and I feel like an alien when it's not around me. I feel so thankful and appreciative that I've got to just enjoy any career in the music industry, but that there might be longevity in this. You watch so many trajectories of people's careers, right? So many people start out smaller than you and over fucking take you. They eclipse you completely. And some stay there and some don't, and that's okay. And we're just either growing or not, but we're still here, and I feel so grateful for that. We're just trying to make art that we believe in, and maybe that matters to us or to anybody else, but I'm having fun.
Has coming back give you a sense that there is longevity? Because using the starting line example, I'm very confident that in another 30 years when I'm fucking 60, I'd still go and watch a starting line show.
Yeah.
So there's going to be loads of kids that in another 30 years will not watch your show.
It's wild. I mean, like, we never, I think it took sort of disappearing and everybody saying, I don't know, talking about us like we were this big and or important band, and we didn't feel that way. It didn't feel that way at the time. We just felt like, you know, one of the smaller bands in a big scene. And I don't know. It took disappearing or people sort of reminding us of how rare success like this is for us to not necessarily appreciate it, but just even realize it, I guess. We just, yeah, we're always sort of fixated on where the band should be and where we weren't and all this sort of stuff. And now we're just delighted and like elated that we get to have it at all again. Yeah.
If there was a specific moment that you could go back to and just relive, bask in the glory of that moment, where would it be?
I'll say this because I walked past the Coco on the way here today. My favorite show the band ever played was when we headlined the Coco, and I watched a bunch of bands play Coco, bands and artists that I just thought were absolutely amazing. But the night we performed there, we had to cancel our show in Cardiff the night before because I was in hospital with like a blood clot because I was just like, I have this thing called thoracic outlet syndrome, which means when I do this over and over and over again, a vein rubs against a rib here and it sort of clotted. And my arm was double the size of the other one and purple, and it was really fucking scary. But I didn't want to cancel the London show if we didn't have to. So I discharged myself from 2 hospitals, both in Cardiff and in Brighton, and played the show in a sling. And my wife injected me with this like blood thinner backstage before the show. It was like really scary, but it was kind of the most special show the band's probably ever going to play for that reason. I mean, maybe these like coming back shows will sort of contest it a little bit, but man, I was just overcome with emotion that night. I was crying on stage before and after and stuff. So walking past the Coco today to come here, I was really thrown back into that day in 2017, I think. That was a really special show, just because it was so unlikely that it was going to happen. And yeah, that was a cool one.
Awesome, man. I guess it's really cool being able to see those memories and appreciate that moment.
Yeah, definitely.
Before we finish then, have you got any advice for anyone that's looking to get started in a band?
Sure. I mean, I'll say this. I won't necessarily frame it as advice. I'll sort of share something that was really, really helpful for us because I don't necessarily think it's going to work for everybody every time. But one of the things that changed our lives was another band's music video. When Rome filmed a music video for their song Head Rush, they threw like a house show in an empty living room or something and just filled it with a bunch of their friends and peers, bands like us, bands that they'd played with. And we all just sort of learned the song. They performed it 5 or 6 times and we shot this video, and they started to gain all this traction because everyone was like, oh my God, who is this band who are just throwing crazy fucking house shows like this? And if you watch the video, it's just me and Ben at like the front and like a bunch of our friends from way back in the day and stuff. But it's sort of, and you know, there was a community. We didn't like fake that there was like hype and a community going on, but we just sort of shined a spotlight on it. They did. And their band started to take off and they took us on a tour. And we sort of got management at the same time and got signed to US labels at the same time and did debut records at a really similar time. And it just sort of, I think what I'm wanting to say is just that sort of working together and sort of celebrating and cherishing like the spirit of the scene is that we can all get to the same place together instead of trying to like tear others down to get there. Because the beautiful thing about this is that there's not like a finite number of spaces on record label rosters or on festivals and tours and stuff. We can all make it, and we can all make it together. But it worked because it just sort of shined a spotlight on the British pop punk scene in a way that without that video wasn't really happening for Rome or for us. So I think to just not try to like change a lot, just shine as bright a spotlight on what's happening. Like, people love a scene, people love a movement. Show, if you have one, like, show people, just document it and get it out there and promote it as best you can. And yeah, people just want to witness like the next biggest, coolest thing. People want to see My Chem when they're still playing tiny venues and stuff. That was huge. I think that gets overlooked a lot, was the video for Head Rush. That changed both of our careers for sure.
I guess that ethos that you're talking about of working together is what you're literally just done with your album.
Yeah. And I would say too that trajectory thing that I talked about, which is that, you know, sometimes it helps to be like a racehorse with its blinders on. Is like, you know, people are gonna climb, fall, climb. We're all moving at different paces, and sometimes success in the industry is you start out as an artist and then you transition into, you're working in behind the scenes, you're working in the industry, and it's all success in the music industry. We're just looking for careers here. And just make what you love, and if it's good, it will connect with people. I mean, I've seen bands that were so incredibly talented just like not get their opportunities for like 10 or more years, and then they start like a new project and it just happens so quickly. If you're doing it, if you're good, if you're making great art, people will notice and someone will give you an opportunity. So don't sell out, don't be inauthentic, like, make what matters to you, and it will get you somewhere. It just might not happen like today, but sometimes it does. That's the crazy thing.
I guess the thing is, if you're not being authentic, then you're not going to keep it up for long enough.
Exactly.
So
and then like if you find success in the inauthentic thing, is that going to feel very good? I don't fucking think so.
That's true, man. Before we finish off then, is there anything that you'd like to mention or promote before we're done?
Gosh, I mean, I'm really proud of Never Happy X. So please listen to our debut record, re-recorded 10 years later with 13 guests on 11 songs. And yeah, come and see us somewhere in the world, if that's Slam Dunk, if that's Warped Tour, if that's who knows where else. We're out here, we're having fun. And yeah, follow this thing, like, subscribe, share it. This podcast is amazing. So thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, dude.
Tons of fun. I really appreciate it.
No, I really appreciate you coming on. And just like for the record, anyone that's listening, like, the album is fucking amazing.
Thank you.
It's really, really good, man. Leander sent it over and I was shocked. Like, not that I didn't expect it to be good, but I was blown away. It was fucking brilliant.
Means a lot. Thanks.
Before we finish then, I just want to quickly mention, because mental health has been brought up in this thing, that UPRAWR does have its own mental health charity, the UPRAWR Mental Health Foundation. We offer 100% free counselling. There's absolutely no catch. We don't charge anything for it. We have fully qualified counsellors that absolutely love all this sort of music, that go to Slam Dunk, we actually have counsellors that are in pretty successful bands, which we won't name, but if anyone is struggling with their mental health, then visit www.uprawarfoundation.org and you can sign up and get some help. If you've been listening to us, thank you. If you want to watch us, we're available on YouTube, and we'll catch you next time.